So we're going to work some more with major scales, and we're going to take an approach with major scales using tetrachords, and we're going to go on and work with the major keys and their key signatures. So let's begin with the tetrachords. And tetrachords actually go back to ancient Greek theory. And tetra means four of something. And a chord is either a musical chord, or I'm thinking chord as in the string of an instrument. And you probably are familiar with the ancient Greek instrument, the lyre. It looks like that small harp that you hold and pluck the strings with your hand. The ancient Greeks believed that the god Hermes, when he was very, very young, had stolen a herd of sacred cows that belonged to Apollo. And Apollo chased him. He was furious that he stole his cows. Hermes trying to avoid him and is running away. So on his flight running away, he slaughters one of the cows and offers it as a burnt offering to the gods. And he burnt the whole cow except for the guts or the entrails. And so he didn't waste it. He used the entrails and spun them into strings and used a turtle shell and some sticks and configured a lyre. And Apollo was catching up with him, and Hermes quickly was playing this new instrument he had invented. And Apollo was right away enthralled with the beautiful music. And some people just say that Apollo invented the lyre, but he may have stolen it from Hermes, who he was chasing for his cows. And the lyre then became one of Apollo's symbols, and music is one of his domains, the god of beauty and music. So that lyre is often associated with Apollo. And they can have as few as, well, I guess they could have one string, but often they have 3, 4, and then many more strings. But back to four of something, we're going to go with the lyre that had 4 strings on it. And the first and fourth note of that lyre would be like the ancient Greeks' first and last note of their scale at that time. We use the octave, and how the notes are arranged in between the first and last note, it gives us our scale. And of course, I'm playing C major right now. But that lyre only had 4 notes, not 8. And so the first note and the fourth note of the lyre are a fourth. Now, how the other 2 strings are tuned, it can be a variety of things, but the first and fourth note are always a fourth. Okay? So tetrachord is 4 consecutive notes, like those 4 strings on the lyre. So I'm going to play this tetrachord, and I'm actually going to play it descending. So I'm going to start on the top note. And again, there's the fourth. But let's look at the other 2 notes. C to B, of course, is a half step, a minor second. There's no black note there. The next interval, from the 3rd string to down, or the 3rd note down to the 2nd note, a whole step. And then another whole step. So descending, half step, whole step, whole step. Let's play it ascending. Whole step, half step. Okay, so remember that pattern. 4 notes, the fourth, whole, half. Well, I'm going to play another tetrachord. This time I'm going to start here on F. And you notice that if I play down a fourth on the white notes of the piano, you get the exact same tetrachord. A descending half, whole. So both these tetrachords have whole, whole, half in them. Now, you probably have already seen what's going on here. These two tetrachords, if you play, they're joined by one more step. And that possibly is what happened with the ancient Greek string instruments, that they began with that fourth, and then maybe they just added more strings and another fourth, maybe, I don't know. But what happened was they built our major scale. We took these two tetrachords, joined them by a major second, and we have that pattern. Now we have 8 notes, 7 notes with one repeated, an octave, but it's built out of 2 tetrachords. So let me show you how this might be helpful. When you do your homework this week and you're writing major scales, remember the major scale, like most scales, starts and ends on the same note. So if we start here, let's start and end on E. Okay? If we just play the white notes, that is not a major scale. But what if we make those 2 tetrachords? So I'm going to start at the top again. And remember the first, and think up down a fourth. And we need a half and a whole and a whole. That's a half step, a whole step, and another whole step. So if I join this to one more tetrachord by a major second, and I play another tetrachord, half step, whole step, whole step. And do you hear it? Look what happens. We've created an E major scale. So here's the same scale in musictheory.net, and it begins on E, ends on E. And if we start at the top of the scale and think of those tetrachords, that first half step here, these 4 notes, E, D, C, B, is actually the top of the second tetrachord. And I'm going to work on them as we did on the piano in descending order. So I need a half step right here. E, D is a whole step. But if I raise this note, it becomes D sharp. I need another whole step. So that's C sharp. And then here's the first note of the tetrachord, and that is a whole step, C sharp B. Now this is the first note. This is a little confusing because I'm working backwards, but this is the first note of the second tetrachord, and that makes this the 4th note of the first tetrachord. So I need a whole step here in between them. So here's B and here's A. That is a major second. That's a whole step. So now I'm working from the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st. I'm working the first tetrachord descending. G, A down to G. I need a half step here. So I'm going to make this G sharp, and then a whole step, F sharp, and then I end up on E again. And there it is, an E major scale. And if you look at the black notes, there's 4 of them, which is a great segue to my next topic, the key signatures. Okay? All right, so I'm going to give you more homework this week on writing the major scales, and you can do it any way that works for you. I gave you several videos last week to watch. If this doesn't work, go to musictheory.net and go to his lessons. I think I put a link for that in Canvas, and he takes it through step by step. you can either go the whole formula for the major scale, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 but that's a lot to remember. Or you can do 2 tetrachords like we did just now. And put them together, you get a major scale. All right, let's talk about key signatures. First of all, what is a key signature? Well, if you look at the beginning of any piece of music, for example here, you see the clef, a treble clef, a bass clef, joined together with that brace. We did that way back first week. That creates a grand staff. And immediately after, you see a group of sharps. In this case, a whole bunch of sharps. If you've played music at all, especially if you played a band instrument, that's a pretty frightening key signature. And just think about what that means. The other thing that's possible is a group of flats. And notice that that key signature appears at the beginning of every line of music. It's the first thing traditionally that appears after the clef. If you go back to the first line, you have a clef, key signature, time signature. But time signatures only appear at the beginning. The key signature, however, appears on every line. If you ever get a piece of music that is created by someone who does it like they're lazy, take shortcuts, and they leave off the key signatures, it'll make your eyes spin out of your head. It's really, really difficult to read. So let's talk a little more about key signatures. One that's not quite as overwhelming. This will do. This one has 2 sharps in it. So if you played a band instrument or you took piano lessons, you might have learned that from your teacher. Well, when you see a key signature, that means that all those notes in that piece of music are changed, in the case of the piano, from the white note to a black note. Or if you were in the 5th or 6th grade and you were learning a band instrument, like maybe you were learning the trumpet, and you had played all white notes. And so you had to memorize a lot of fingerings. And you learned that, well, to play the note F, I have to press down the first valve. And then about your 10th lesson, your teacher showed you an F sharp. And the thing that was most concerning was, now I have to press down my second valve. F sharp is the second valve. F is the first valve. And so for a young musician, a lot of times what the key signature means is what notes have to be changed. What new fingerings do I have to learn? You know, on a piano, it's pretty easy. You can use any finger you want. But if you're playing a complicated woodwind instrument like the clarinet or the flute, there are so many keys and buttons, and learning fingerings is really overwhelming. That's why that key signature I showed you a minute ago with all the sharps is really tough for instrumental players. But what the key signature really does is rearranges notes to create the patterns that we've been talking about, the major scale and the tetrachords. That's what key signatures do. They create a tonal center. In classical music, often you'll hear a title like, we're listening to Mozart's Symphony No. 40 in G minor. Why is it called in G minor? What does that mean? Well, what it means is the tonal center of the main part of that work is in the key of G, G minor. We're working on major. But that's what that title means. So, let's start with the C major scale. It's all white notes. But you could start on any white note of the piano, and I will in just a second, but this is the only one from C to C that gives us those 2 tetrachords and gives us that major scale. If I move one note to the left and start on B, try playing a song in that key, in C major. The intervals are in the right arrangement so that your ear recognizes that familiar melody. But if I move it one step this way, you know, right away you're like, that can't be right. And it's not, because you no longer have the correct pattern of whole steps and half steps. You no longer have the two tetrachords. Okay? So we're going to go from C major, and we're going to go to the next, well, I'm going to call it the next easiest key signature. Okay, so we're going to play the white notes again, but we're going to go G to G. And it was going pretty well there for a minute, until this note. That note's not right, is it? So if I tried, I had to change this. Also, if we look at the tetrachord, there's that half step is missing. So I change this. So if I have one sharp in the key signature, then I have a G major scale. Okay? Now, at the very last week of the course, if at all, we'll talk more about, you may have heard of the circle of fifths. All I want to say about that right now is, if you start on C major and you go up a fifth, what the circle of fifths means is we have to add a sharp. So to play from C to C, no sharps, no flats. But if we go up a fifth, we have to make one more sharp. If we go another fifth in the circle of fifths, we end up on D, two sharps. And I won't bore you with this any more than I might have. But up one more fifth to A, three sharps. Now, you can go down as well. So start on C again, down a fifth. By the way, for ear training, down a fifth sounds like the Flintstones. Down a fifth from C is F. And to play F to F, I need a half step there, which is going this way on the circle of fifths, flats. If I go down another fifth, two flats. And down another flat, three flats. Okay? So, let me show you one more thing in this book while we're here. This was a very, very important collection that Bach wrote back in the, I guess, 18th century, called The Well-Tempered Clavier. And it was at this point in history that pianos were tuned the way they are today. And it was the first time it was possible to play in all of the major keys and all of the minor keys. And there's 30 in all. There's 15 major keys and 15 minor keys. And so Bach wrote these piano pieces, or keyboard pieces. He didn't have a piano, it wasn't invented. And he composed these piano pieces in every key. So if you look real closely here, this is pretty small. This is C major, no sharps or flats. But then as you go through the collection, you see that he uses all of the key signatures. And I just want to pick one of these to illustrate a couple points. That group of sharps at the beginning of the staff, they're always in the same order because of that circle of fifths that I was talking about. One sharp is always going to be F sharp. If you go up another fifth, it's going to be F sharp and C sharp. Look at this key signature here. F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, and E sharp. Okay, and I'll show you a little more about that. So let's work some more on major scales and using tetrachords and key signatures.